Get out of this room now. Evelyn's voice sliced through the quiet American home, her eyes blazing with disdain as she confronted Niaza. The stunning black woman, draped in a shimmering turquoise silk nightgown, stood frozen in her bedroom with Ethan, her white husband. Evelyn, her mother-in-law, harbored a deep-seated prejudice, viewing Niaza as an intruder who stole her son from Lana, the white childhood sweetheart who once abandoned Ethan for money. Now Lana returned with a sinister scheme, and Evelyn demanded Niaza yield the marital sanctuary. The clash ignited, unraveling shocking secrets. What drove Lana back? Could Niaza reclaim her place? Tension simmered, promising a tale of betrayal and resilience that grips the soul. The humid Louisiana air clung to the skin as Niaza stepped into the bustling community fair, her heart thrumming with an unfamiliar rhythm. She was a vision, ebony skin glowing under the golden sun, her laughter a melody that turned heads. Amid the chatter and the scent of fried beignets, her gaze locked with Ethan's, a tall white man with kind hazel eyes and a disarming smile. It was a collision of worlds, a spark that ignited something fierce within her. He approached, voice soft yet steady, introducing himself as a local architect volunteering to rebuild homes after the last storm. Niaza, a passionate art therapist, felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't just a meeting, it was destiny clawing its way into her life. Days melted into months, each stolen glance and late-night conversation weaving a bond that felt unbreakable. Ethan's gentle touch, his stories of a childhood shadowed by loss, drew Niaza in deeper. She saw in him a refuge, a man who saw her, not her skin, not her struggles, but her soul. Yet beneath the joy, a tremor of unease lingered. When he first mentioned his mother, Evelyn, his tone shifted, a hint of caution threading through. Niaza brushed it aside, her heart too full of love to heed the warning. Their love blossomed in the vibrant streets of New Orleans, where jazz spilled from every corner. And soon Ethan proposed under a canopy of magnolia trees, his voice trembling with hope. Niaza said yes, tears streaking her cheeks, believing she'd found her forever. The wedding was a kaleidoscope of joy and tension. Niaza wore a gown that hugged her curves, a celebration of her heritage, but Evelyn's eyes narrowed as she approached. The older black woman, regal yet stern, offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're the one," she murmured, her voice laced with something Niaza couldn't name, disapproval, perhaps, or suspicion. The reception buzzed with laughter, but Evelyn's presence loomed, her comments slicing like shards of glass. "Ethan always liked lighter skin," she said once, her tone casual yet cutting, leaving Niaza's chest tight with hurt. She clung to Ethan's hand, his reassuring squeeze a lifeline. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Their new life began in a charming Creole cottage in Baton Rouge, a gift from Ethan's late father's estate. The bedroom they chose was a sanctuary, soft beige walls, a four-poster bed draped with sheer curtains, and windows that framed the swaying oaks outside. Niaza felt a surge of pride as she unpacked her art supplies, envisioning a future painted with love. But Evelyn's shadow crept in. The first visit came unannounced, her knock sharp and impatient. She swept through the house, her critique biting, "This color's too dull," or "You need better curtains." Niaza's stomach churned, a mix of anger and helplessness, but she bit her tongue, wanting peace for Ethan's sake. Then came the name, Lana. Evelyn mentioned her casually over dinner one night, her voice softening. Ethan's childhood friend, so sweet, so pure, she sighed, her gaze lingering on Niaza. The story unfolded. Lana, a white girl with golden hair and a charming laugh, had grown up next door, their bond unbreakable until she left for Europe 3 years ago, chasing wealth. Evelyn's eyes darkened. "She left because of you," she accused, her words a slap. Niaza's heart sank, confusion warring with indignation. Ethan intervened, his voice firm, but the damage was done. Niaza lay awake that night, the creak of the house echoing her turmoil, wondering if love could withstand such a rift. Evelyn's visits grew frequent, each one a test of Niaza's resolve. She rearranged furniture, criticized Niaza's cooking, and dropped hints about Lana's return. "She's coming back soon," Evelyn said one afternoon, her smile cryptic. Niaza's chest tightened, a storm brewing within. She confided in Ethan, her voice breaking. She hates me, she whispered, tears welling. He pulled her close, promising to talk to his mother, but his hesitation stung. Niaza felt isolated, her joy eroding under Evelyn's gaze. The bedroom, once a haven, now felt like a battlefield. Every glance from Ethan's mother a silent demand for her to yield. One evening, as Jazz floated through the open window, Ethan received a call. His face paled and he turned to Niaza, his voice hesitant. Lana's back. Mom wants her to visit. Niaza's heart plummeted, a cold dread settling in. She nodded, forcing a smile, but inside fear gnawed. The next day Lana arrived, elegant, pale, and disarmingly polite. Evelyn's face lit up, her arms enveloping the white woman like a long-lost daughter. Niaza watched, her stomach twisting, sensing the ground shifting beneath her. Lana's eyes met hers, a flicker of something, triumph perhaps, sending a shiver down Niaza's spine. The room grew heavy with unspoken tension, and Niaza knew the battle for her home, her love, had just begun. The air in the Baton Rouge cottage thickened with unspoken resentment as Lana's presence lingered, her laughter a discordant note against the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Niaza stood in the kitchen, her turquoise silk nightgown catching the dim light, her beauty a stark contrast to the turmoil churning within. Ethan's assurances echoed hollowly as Lana settled into the guest room, her every move orchestrated by Evelyn's approving nods. The mother-in-law's adoration for the white woman was palpable, her dark eyes gleaming with a possessive pride that excluded Niaza entirely. Each day the house felt less like a home, the walls closing in as Evelyn's subtle jabs grew bolder. Lana always knew how to brighten a room, she'd muse, her tone dripping with implication, leaving Niaza's heart bruised and her spirit fraying. Niaza tried to hold on to the love that had brought her here, her fingers tracing the edge of the kitchen counter where she and Ethan had once shared late-night dreams. But the weight of Evelyn's disdain pressed harder, a silent accusation that Niaza had stolen Ethan from his rightful pass. Lana, with her practiced smiles and tales of European grandeur, wove herself into the fabric of the household, her voice a constant reminder of a history Niaza could never claim. Ethan, torn between his wife and his mother's expectations, offered weak smiles, his hands hesitant when they reached for hers. Niaza's chest ached with a mix of love and betrayal, her trust in him wavering as he failed to confront Evelyn's growing favoritism. The turning point came on a sultry evening, the scent of magnolias drifting through the open windows. Niaza was sketching in the living room, her art a refuge from the tension, when Evelyn's voice cut through the stillness. She's staying longer, the older woman declared, her gaze fixed on Lana, who lounged on the sofa with an air of entitlement. Niaza's pencil froze, her heart lurching. Longer? She asked, her voice trembling with a mix of dread and defiance. Evelyn's lips curled into a thin smile. Yes, she needs stability. You wouldn't understand. The word stung, a direct assault on Niaza's place in this family. She clenched her fists, the paper crumpling under her grip, her mind racing with the injustice of it all. That night, as she lay beside Ethan, the four-poster bed a battleground of emotions, Niaza's thoughts spiraled. She could hear Lana's soft laughter from down the hall, a sound that twisted the knife of insecurity deeper. Ethan's breathing was uneven, his silence a wall between them. We need to set boundaries, Niaza whispered, her voice raw with suppressed tears. He turned to her, his eyes shadowed with guilt. I'll talk to Mom, he promised, but the lack of conviction in his tone left her cold. She pressed her face into the pillow, the silk of her nightgown cool against her skin, willing herself to find the strength amid the encroaching darkness. The next morning, the tension escalated. Evelyn arrived unannounced, her presence a storm cloud over the breakfast table. Lana trailed behind, her white blouse pristine, a stark contrast to Niaza's rumpled elegance. We need to discuss arrangements, Evelyn announced, her tone brooking no argument. Niaza's stomach dropped as the older woman's eyes swept the room, landing on the bedroom door. Lana needs a proper space, she continued, her voice hardening. That room, your room, would suit her. Niaza's breath caught, a surge of anger and disbelief flooding her veins. My room? She echoed, her voice rising. Evelyn nodded, unflinching. You can manage elsewhere. Lana's been through enough. The words hit like a physical blow, Niaza's heart pounding with a mix of rage and humiliation. She glanced at Ethan, searching for support, but he stared at his plate, his jaw tight. The betrayal cut deeper than Evelyn's words, a silent acknowledgement that her husband might not fight for her. This is my home, Niaza said, her voice steady despite the storm within. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her lips parting to retort, but the moment hung heavy, charged with the promise of a confrontation that would redefine their lives. Niaza's mind raced, her beauty a mask for the fire igniting inside, ready to challenge the forces threatening to unravel her world. As the day wore on, Niaza retreated to the bedroom, her sanctuary now a battleground. She stood by the window, the turquoise silk clinging to her form, her reflection in the glass a warrior's resolve. The sound of Lana's voice drifted up, sweet and manipulative, weaving a web around Evelyn. Niaza's chest tightened, a blend of fear and determination. She knew this was more than a room. It was her identity, her love, her right to belong. The creak of the floorboards signaled Ethan's approach, his footsteps hesitant. She turned, her eyes meeting his, a silent plea and a fierce demand for allegiance. The stage was set, and Niaza braced herself for the war to come, her spirit unyielding against the tide of prejudice and deceit. The silence shattered as Ethan crossed the threshold, his footsteps echoing Niaza's racing heartbeat. She turned from the window, her turquoise silk nightgown whispering against her skin, her dark eyes blazing with a vulnerability she rarely showed. Ethan's face, usually so open, was etched with conflict, his white skin flushed, his hazel eyes avoiding hers. We need to talk, he murmured, closing the door behind him, the click of finality that made Niaza's stomach twist. She wanted to scream, to demand why he hadn't defended her at breakfast, but instead she crossed her arms, a shield against the hurt flooding her chest. Talk? Or make excuses for your mother? Her voice cracked, laced with the pain of feeling like an outsider in her own marriage. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair, his posture slumping with guilt. She's protective. Lana's going through a tough time abroad. Debts, bad choices. Mom thinks helping her will fix things. Niaza's laughter was bitter, a sound that cut through the room like glass. Protective? She's erasing me, Ethan. Every look, every word. It's like I'm the villain who stole you from Lana. The name hung between them, heavy with history. Ethan stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers, but she pulled away, the rejection stinging them both. His touch, once her anchor, now felt like a reminder of divided loyalties. Deep down, Niaza feared he still harbored echoes of his past with Lana, the white girl who fit Evelyn's ideal. The days blurred into a haze of unease as Lana's temporary stay stretched, her presence a constant erosion of Niaza's peace. Lana moved through the house with effortless grace, her golden hair catching the light, her stories of Parisian nights enchanting Evelyn. Niaza watched from the shadows, her heart aching as the older woman laughed at Lana's jokes, her dark features softening in a way they never did for her daughter-in-law. You're like the daughter I always wanted, Evelyn cooed one afternoon in the kitchen, handing Lana a cup of tea. Niaza, chopping vegetables nearby, felt a sharp pang, jealousy mixed with sorrow. Why couldn't Evelyn see her strength, her love for Ethan? Instead, she was reduced to an intruder, her ebony beauty a threat rather than a gift. Lana's intrusion deepened subtly at first. She borrowed Niaza's lotions without asking, her fingers lingering on the bottles as if claiming territory. Then came the rearrangements. The living room pillows fluffed differently, the bookshelf reordered to favor Lana's borrowed novels. Niaza discovered it one evening, her art supplies pushed aside for Lana's sketch pad, a blatant overstep that ignited fury in her veins. This is my space, she whispered to herself, her hands trembling as she restored order. But the violation lingered, a knot of resentment tightening in her chest. She confronted Ethan that night, her voice low and fierce. She's not just staying, she's taking over. He nodded, his eyes filled with remorse, but his promise to address it felt fragile, like a thread ready to snap. Evelyn's support for Lana grew unabashed, her visits now daily rituals of indulgence. She'd bring groceries tailored to Lana's tastes, imported cheeses, fine wines, ignoring Niaza's preferences. Lana needs comfort after all she's endured, Evelyn explained once, her tone dismissive as she glanced at Niaza. The implication burned. Niaza's comfort was secondary. Hurt morphed into anger, fueling Niaza's quiet observations. She noticed Lana's furtive phone calls, her whispers laced with urgency, but dismissed them as paranoia. Yet the unease gnawed, a premonition that something darker lurked beneath Lana's polished facade. The hints about the bedroom began innocuously, Evelyn's comments slipping in like poison. "That room's so cozy, perfect for someone needing rest," she'd say, her eyes flicking toward the master suite during a tour of the house. Niaza's blood ran cold each time, her mind reeling at the audacity. Was this Evelyn's plan? To displace her entirely? The thought twisted her insides, a blend of fear and defiance. She confided in a friend over coffee one day, her voice breaking. "It's like I'm invisible." The empathy in her friend's eyes offered solace, but back home, the isolation deepened. Ethan tried to bridge the gap, his arms around her at night a tentative peace, but Niaza's trust frayed, her love shadowed by doubt. One humid afternoon, as thunder rumbled outside, Niaza overheard a snippet that chilled her soul. Lana in the guest room murmured into her phone, "Just a little longer. Evelyn's eating out of my hand." Niaza froze in the hallway, her heart pounding, the words a revelation of deceit. Was Lana playing them all? The suspicion ignited a fire within, her beauty masking a resolve hardening like steel. She retreated to the bedroom, the four-poster bed a temporary fortress, her mind plotting how to unravel the web. Ethan entered later, sensing her turmoil, his concern genuine yet insufficient. "What's wrong?" he asked, his hand on her shoulder. Niaza met his gaze, her eyes stormy. "Everything," she replied, the word heavy with the weight of impending confrontation. The foundation of their life cracked further, setting the stage for the storm to break. The storm broke not with thunder, but with the sharp twist of a key in the lock, the front door yielding to Evelyn's uninvited entry late that evening. Niaza, still reeling from her exchange with Ethan, had retreated to the bedroom, the turquoise silk of her nightgown a fragile armor against the vulnerability clawing at her insides. She paced the Persian rug, her bare feet silent on the woven threads, her mind a whirlwind of doubt and resolve. Ethan's everything lingered like a ghost, his admission a crack in the facade of their union that threatened to swallow her whole. Love, she realized with a bitter ache, was not enough if it came laced with such conditional loyalty. Down the hall, voices murmured, Evelyn's low timbre mingling with Lana's lilting cadence, a duet of familiarity that excluded Niaza entirely. She froze, her heart slamming against her ribs as footsteps approached. The bedroom door swung open without a knock, Evelyn filling the frame like a sentinel of judgment. Her dark eyes, sharp as obsidian, swept over Niaza, taking in the disheveled curls framing her face, the defiant set of her shoulders. Lana hovered behind, her pale features illuminated by the hallway light, a ghost from Ethan's past now manifesting in flesh and ambition. "We need to settle this," Evelyn declared, her voice a whip crack in the intimate space, stepping inside as if she owned the very air. Niaza's breath hitched, a surge of indignation flooding her veins, hot and unyielding. This was her sanctuary, the bed where she'd whispered vows to Ethan, the nightstand holding her grandmother's locket, a talisman of roots Evelyn dismissed. "Settle what?" she demanded, her tone edged with steel, though her hands trembled at her sides. Evelyn's lips thinned, her posture unbowed by age or propriety. "The room. Lana needs it. Proper rest, stability, things you've taken for granted." The words landed like blows, each one stripping away layers of Niaza's hard-won security. Lana shifted, her eyes downcast in feigned humility, but Niaza caught the glint of satisfaction, a predator's gleam that twisted her gut. "You can't be serious," Niaza whispered, her voice breaking on the edge of disbelief, tears pricking her eyes not from weakness, but from the raw injustice of it all. Evelyn advanced, her presence suffocating, the scent of her lavender perfume cloying. "Deadly serious. You've had your time here playing house. Lana's family. Real family. She deserves this. The prejudice hung explicit now, Evelyn's gaze raking over Niaza's form as if her blackness were a stain on the pristine sheets. Niaza's chest heaved, a storm of emotions crashing, humiliation at being reduced to an interloper, fury at the erasure of her marriage, and a deep, aching sorrow for the love Ethan professed, yet failed to shield. "This is my home," she retorted, her voice rising, laced with the fire of generations who had fought for less. "My bed, my life with Ethan. You don't get to decide." Lana's hand fluttered to her throat, a theatrical gasp escaping her lips. "I don't want to cause trouble," she murmured, her voice honeyed poison. But Evelyn silenced her with a wave, her focus locked on Niaza like a hunter sighting prey. "Trouble? You're the trouble. Sliding in where you don't belong, turning my son against his own blood." The accusation pierced deep, evoking ghosts of Niaza's own battles against judgment, the subtle racisms she'd endured long before this marriage. Her skin flushed hot, not with shame, but with a burgeoning rage that steadied her stance. She stepped forward, closing the distance, her beauty fierce in the lamplight, eyes locking with Evelyn's in unyielding challenge. Before Evelyn could retort, a muffled vibration cut the tension. Lana's phone slipped from her pocket onto the dresser. The screen lit up, illuminating a name. "Darling, Paris." Lana lunged for it, but Niaza was faster, snatching it with a swiftness born of instinct. "Give that back," Lana hissed, her composure cracking, revealing the desperation beneath. Niaza held it aloft, her thumb hovering over the answer button, heart pounding with a mix of trepidation and triumph. The call connected, a man's voice crackling through the speaker, thick French accent laced with urgency. "Lana chérie, the debts are piling. Evelyn's jewelry, have you secured it yet? We need the cash to vanish before they trace us." The room plunged into stunned silence, the words a thunderclap shattering the facade. Niaza's eyes widened, the phone trembling in her grip as the full horror unfolded. Lana's return not born of remorse, but predation. Evelyn's face drained of color, her stern mask fracturing into confusion, then dawning betrayal. "What? What is this?" she stammered, her voice a fragile thread, stepping back as if struck. Lana's eyes darted wildly, her pale cheeks flushing crimson. "It's nothing. Lies. She's twisting it." But the man's voice persisted, oblivious. "Remember, play the heartbroken card. Get the safes combination tonight." Niaza's mind reeled, the pieces slotting into place with sickening clarity. The borrowed lotions, a ploy for access, the rearranged shelves, a scout's reconnaissance, Evelyn's favoritism, a manipulated lever. Betrayal surged anew, not just from Lana's deceit, but from the older woman's blindness to it, her prejudice blinding her to the wolf at her door. "You used her," Niaza accused Lana, her voice low and venomous, thrusting the phone forward like evidence in a trial. "All this, the tears, the stories, to bleed her dry for your gambling debts?" Lana snatched the device, ending the call with frantic swipes, but the damage was irrevocable, her mask in tatters. Evelyn clutched the bedpost, her knuckles whitening, a gasp escaping as the truth clawed its way in. For the first time, vulnerability cracked her armor, eyes glistening with the sting of exploitation, the realization that her cherished daughter had preyed on her loneliness. Niaza watched, her own anger softening into a reluctant pity, the shared wound of deception bridging the chasm between them, if only for a heartbeat. "Get out," Evelyn whispered finally, her voice hoarse, directed at Lana but echoing for them all. The white woman backed away, tears real now, born of exposure rather than sorrow. "Evelyn, please, I didn't mean—" But the door slammed behind her retreat, leaving the room a battlefield strewn with shattered illusions. Niaza stood amid the wreckage, her nightgown a sapphire veil over her trembling form, the weight of victory bittersweet. Ethan's absence amplified the isolation, but in this moment she felt a spark of empowerment. Her voice, her vigilance, had unmasked the shadows. Evelyn met her gaze, the air thick with unspoken apology, the first fracture in their enmity. Yet as silence settled, Niaza wondered if mending could follow such a rift, her heart a tempest of relief and unresolved ache, bracing for the fallout that would test every bond she held dear. The echo of the slammed door reverberated through the cottage like a final judgment, leaving Niaza and Evelyn in a vacuum of stunned quiet. Niaza's hand still clutched the phone, its screen dark now, but the incriminating words burned in her mind, a litany of greed that exposed the fragility of trust. Her turquoise silk nightgown felt suddenly too thin, a whisper of vulnerability against the chill of revelation. Evelyn staggered back against the dresser, her face a mask of crumbling certainty, eyes wide, lips parted in a silent gasp, the regal poise that had defined her fracturing into raw, unguarded shock. For the first time, Niaza saw not the adversary, but a woman adrift, her world upended by the very hand she'd cradled. You heard wrong, Evelyn stammered, her voice a threadbare defense, clutching the edge of the bed as if it could anchor her. But the tremor in her dark hands betrayed her, the knuckles paling against her ebony skin. Niaza's heart twisted, a cocktail of vindication and unexpected sorrow surging through her. She'd longed for this moment, to shatter Evelyn's pedestal of prejudice, yet witnessing the older woman's unraveling stirred an unwelcome empathy. Evelyn, who had wielded disdain like a weapon, now looked small, her breath coming in shallow bursts, the weight of betrayal etching lines deeper into her face. "No, Evelyn," Niaza said softly, her tone laced with steel wrapped in compassion, stepping closer despite the urge to flee. "I heard everything. Lana's not here for healing. She's here to rob you blind. The jewelry, the safe, it's all a con to pay off her debts." Evelyn's eyes flashed with denial, a spark of fury igniting amid the hurt. "Lies, she's family. My son's first love, pure as the day she left." But the words faltered, her gaze darting to the door where Lana had vanished, the ghost of affection curdling into doubt. Niaza pressed the phone into Evelyn's palm, her fingers brushing the older woman's in a gesture that bridged their chasm, if only fleetingly. "Listen for yourself. I recorded the tail end when she didn't hang up fast enough." Evelyn's hand shook as she fumbled with the device, the speaker crackling to life with Lana's frantic whispers, echoing the Frenchman's demands. Each syllable was a dagger. "Evelyn's naive. She'll hand it over." Twisting deeper, Evelyn's face contorting from disbelief to devastation. A sob escaped her, raw and unbidden, her body sagging onto the bed's edge, shoulders heaving with the force of suppressed grief. Niaza knelt before her, the silk pooling around her knees, her own eyes stinging with unshed tears. In this vulnerable tableau, the barriers of race and resentment thinned. Niaza saw the woman beneath, the widow who'd poured her hopes into Lana's return, blind to the viper's coil. "She played you," Niaza murmured, her voice gentle yet unyielding, reaching out to steady Evelyn's trembling arm. The touch was electric, a tentative olive branch amid the ruins. Evelyn recoiled at first, her pride a reflex, but then her hand covered Niaza's, gripping with desperate need. "Why didn't I see?" she whispered, tears carving paths down her cheeks, her voice breaking on the edge of a lifetime's regrets. The admission hung heavy, a confession that peeled back layers of Evelyn's armor, revealing the fear of loneliness that had fueled her bias against Niaza all along. The front door burst open downstairs, Ethan's voice calling out, "Niaza! Mom!" His footsteps pounding up the stairs like an approaching gale. Niaza rose, her heart leaping with a mix of relief and apprehension, smoothing her nightgown as if composure could mend the fractures ahead. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his white skin ashen under the hallway light, hazel eyes widening at the scene, his mother weeping on the bed, his wife standing resolute beside her. "What the hell happened?" he demanded, crossing the room in 2 strides, his concern a torrent that washed over Niaza first, his hand finding her waist in instinctive protection. For the first time that night, warmth bloomed in her chest, his touch a reaffirmation that chased the shadows of doubt. Niaza met his gaze, her voice steady despite the emotional tempest. "Lana's a fraud, Ethan. She's been using your mom, us, to fund her escape from debts." She recounted the call, the plot, her words precise and unflinching, each detail drawing Ethan's face from confusion to horror. Evelyn nodded weakly. The phone extended like damning evidence, her sobs quieting into hiccuping breaths. Ethan's jaw clenched, a storm of betrayal darkening his features as he replayed the fragments in his mind. The subtle manipulations he'd overlooked for peace's sake. "That bitch," he growled, the profanity foreign on his lips, his free hand balling into a fist. He turned to his mother, kneeling to envelop her in a hug, his voice softening to a murmur of comfort. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have seen it too." But anger resurfaced as he pulled back, his eyes hardening. "Where is she now?" Evelyn gestured vaguely toward the stairs, her composure fracturing anew. Ethan stormed out, his shouts echoing, "Lana, get down here!" Niaza following at a measured pace, her pulse thundering with anticipation. In the living room, Lana stood frozen, her pale face streaked with mascara, suitcase half-packed at her feet. "Ethan, it's not," she began, her voice a practiced plea. But he cut her off, thrusting the phone forward. "Save it. We know everything. Get out. Now." The finality in his tone brooked no mercy, his stance a wall between her and the life she'd infiltrated. Lana's eyes darted to Evelyn, seeking salvation, but the older woman's gaze was ice, her silence a condemnation deeper than words. Defeated, Lana snatched her bag, her heels clicking a hasty retreat toward the door, the night swallowing her like the debts she fled. Ethan slammed it shut behind her, the sound a cathartic punctuation, his chest heaving with released fury. He turned to Niaza, pulling her into his arms, his embrace fierce and apologetic. "I should have protected you from all of this," he whispered into her curls, his voice thick with regret, the warmth of his body a balm against her lingering chill. Niaza melted into him, tears finally spilling, a release of the isolation she'd endured. Yet as Evelyn shuffled into the room, her eyes downcast, the victory felt incomplete, a fragile truce demanding reckoning. Evelyn extended her hand, the house key glinting in her palm, her fingers unsteady. "Take it," she said hoarsely, the gesture laden with surrender, her pride yielding to the truth's unsparing light. Niaza accepted it, the metal cool against her skin, a symbol of reclaimed boundaries. Evelyn's eyes met hers, glistening with a nascent respect, the first crack in the wall of prejudice. I was wrong about you," she admitted, the words costing her dearly, her voice a whisper of atonement. Niaza nodded, her heart swelling with cautious hope, the shared betrayal forging an uneasy alliance. As Ethan drew them both into a tentative circle, the cottage exhaled, the air lighter but charged with the promise of healing's arduous path. Niaza leaned into her husband, the silk of her gown a testament to her enduring grace, knowing the scars would linger, but the dawn of understanding had broken. The key's weight in Niaza's palm felt like a talisman of fragile peace, its edges biting into her skin as Ethan drew her closer, his arms a tentative fortress against the night's wreckage. Evelyn lingered in the doorway, her silhouette a shadow of defeat, her dark eyes hollowed by the betrayal that had stripped her bare. The cottage, once a haven of whispered promises, now hummed with the residue of shattered illusions. Lana's hurried footsteps, a fading echo, the air thick with the scent of spilled tea and unspoken recriminations. Niaza leaned into Ethan, her turquoise silk nightgown a cool veil over the heat of her turmoil, but even his embrace couldn't fully staunch the bleed of doubt seeping into her heart. Trust, she realized with a pang that twisted like a knife, was a fragile mosaic, cracked irreparably by the fissures of neglect and favoritism. Dawn crept in reluctantly, painting the living room in muted grays as the three of them sat in uneasy vigil. Ethan paced, his white skin taut over knuckles white from clenching, his hazel eyes stormy with a rage that mirrored Niaza's inner tempest. "We can't let her get away with this," he growled, his voice rough from lack of sleep, slamming his fist on the coffee table. The thud reverberated, jolting Evelyn from her stupor on the armchair, her hands wringing a handkerchief into knots. Niaza watched her mother-in-law, a swell of conflicted pity rising in her chest. The woman who'd wielded prejudice like a shield now huddled, exposed and adrift. her ebony features etched with lines of regret that age hadn't yet drawn. "The police," Niaza suggested quietly, her voice steady despite the exhaustion weighing her limbs. "We report the scam. Get a restraining order. She won't touch your things, Evelyn." Evelyn's head snapped up, her gaze locking on Niaza with a mix of gratitude and shame, the first unguarded vulnerability passing between them like a bridge over abyss. "My things. God, I was such a fool," she whispered, her voice cracking, tears tracing fresh paths down her cheeks. The admission hung raw, Evelyn's pride crumbling further as she recounted fragments. Lana's subtle probes about the safe's location, the innocent questions about heirloom jewelry passed down from her own mother. Each revelation deepened the chasm of her isolation, Evelyn's world shrinking to this room, her son's wife the unlikely anchor. Niaza reached out, her hand hovering before settling on Evelyn's knee, the touch electric with newfound solidarity. "You weren't a fool, you were hopeful," Niaza said softly, her own heart aching with the echo of her own blindsides, the pain of loving despite the barbs. Evelyn covered her hand, squeezing with desperate fervor, a silent plea for forgiveness that Niaza offered with a nod, the gesture mending a thread in the frayed tapestry of their bond. By midday, the police station loomed, a sterile fortress of fluorescent lights and echoing voices in downtown Baton Rouge. Ethan gripped Niaza's hand as they filed the report, his fingers interlaced with hers, a lifeline amid the bureaucratic chill. The officer, a no-nonsense woman with a badge gleaming like judgment, took their statements with clinical efficiency. Lana's fabricated tales, the recorded call, Evelyn's coerced trust. "We'll issue a warrant for fraud and attempted theft," she assured, her pen scratching notes that sealed Lana's fate. As they emerged into the humid air, Ethan pulled Niaza aside, his face crumpling with the weight of his failures. "I let it go too far. Mom's bias, Lana's games. I should have fought harder for you." His voice broke, hazel eyes glistening, the confession a floodgate releasing months of suppressed guilt. Niaza's throat tightened, love warring with the scar of his hesitations, her beauty a mask for the storm raging within. "You did in the end," she murmured, but the words tasted bittersweet. The rift between them a chasm widened by every overlooked slight. Back home, the cottage felt haunted. Lana's ghost in every rearranged drawer, every lingering perfume. Evelyn retreated to her own apartment across town, her departure a quiet unraveling, packing bags with mechanical precision, her eyes avoiding Niaza's, as if the shame burned too bright. "I'll call," she promised at the door, her voice a fragile whisper, the key's absence on her ring a stark emblem of boundaries reclaimed. Niaza hugged her impulsively, the embrace stiff at first, then softening into mutual solace. Evelyn's sobs muffled against her shoulder. "Take care of my boy," Evelyn pleaded, pulling back with eyes brimming, the plea laced with a mother's fear and a dawning respect for the woman she'd wronged. As the door clicked shut, Niaza sagged against it, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave, the victory hollow without the wholeness it promised. That night, the fracture in their marriage surfaced fully, the bedroom a confessional under the moon's pale gaze. Ethan sat on the bed's edge, head in hands, while Niaza stood by the window, her nightgown a sapphire shroud over her weary form. "I love you," he began, his voice raw, "but I see it now, how Mom's poison seeped in, how I let it taint us." Niaza turned, tears spilling unchecked, her heart a battlefield of devotion and disillusion. "It wasn't just her, Ethan. You chose silence too many times. I felt replaceable." The truth landed like a blow, Ethan's face contorting in agony, his hands reaching for her only to fall short. They talked until the stars faded, dissecting the barbs, the biases, the unspoken wounds that had festered. By dawn, the decision crystallized, painful yet necessary. A temporary separation, space to breathe, to rebuild without the shadow of deceit. Niaza packed a single bag, her movements deliberate, each fold of clothing a severance from the life they'd woven. Ethan's eyes tracked her, filled with a desperation that mirrored her own inner turmoil, the fear of loss clashing with the need for clarity. "A month," he proposed, his voice hoarse, sealing it with a kiss that tasted of salt and longing. She nodded, the agreement a balm and a blade, her ebony skin flushed with the resolve of self-preservation. As she drove to her sister's in the Garden District, the rearview mirror framed the cottage shrinking, Evelyn's isolation a parallel echo in her mind. The older woman's solitude a mirror to Niaza's own, both women forging paths through the rubble of misplaced trust. In the days that followed, Evelyn's calls came tentatively at first, then with a hunger for connection. "I replay it all," she'd confess over the phone, her voice steadier, laced with introspection. "How I pushed you away, saw threats where there was only love." Niaza listened, her heart softening at the vulnerability. Evelyn's prejudice peeling away layer by layer, replaced by a tentative admiration for the daughter-in-law, who'd unmasked her folly. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit," Evelyn admitted one evening, the words a bridge across their divide, fostering a fragile kinship born of shared scars. Meanwhile, news of Lana's pursuit trickled in. The warrant served, her frantic flight to the airport thwarted, cuffs clicking in a Baton Rouge holding cell. Justice, cold and inexorable, offered scant comfort to Niaza's aching soul, but it affirmed her vigilance, a quiet triumph amid the separation's sting. Alone in her sister's guest room, Niaza traced the locket at her throat, the turquoise silk folded away, but its memory a talisman of resilience. The separation loomed like a void, Ethan's absence a hollow in her chest, yet in the quiet, she glimpsed clarity, space to reclaim her voice, to heal the wounds of erasure. Evelyn's evolving remorse whispered of redemption's possibility, a slow thaw in the ice of enmity. As rain pattered against the window, Niaza closed her eyes, the storm within quieting to a determined hum, bracing for the reckoning that would either mend or sever the threads of her fractured world. The rain's relentless patter against the Garden District window mirrored the steady drip of Niaza's resolve, each drop a reminder that solitude could be a forge for strength. Her sister's guest room, with its faded floral wallpaper and the faint scent of jasmine from the courtyard below, offered a cocoon of quiet where Niaza could unravel the knots of betrayal without the weight of expectant eyes. Days bled into one another, marked by the rhythm of her art therapy sessions, guiding clients through canvases of chaos toward clarity, while her own sketchpad lay barren, a blank expanse echoing the void Ethan left. She missed him fiercely, the curve of his smile, the way his fingers traced lazy patterns on her skin, but the ache was laced with a sharp clarity. Separation wasn't punishment, but purification, a chance to reclaim the woman Evelyn's shadows had dimmed. Evelyn's calls evolved from tentative check-ins to lifelines of confession, her voice over the line a gravelly whisper stripped of its former barbs. "I sit here staring at the safe, she'd say one afternoon, the Baton Rouge humidity seeping through even the phone's static. "All those pieces from Mama, sapphires from her wedding, the gold locket with Daddy's photo, Lana could have taken them, and I'd have let her, blind as a fool." Niaza listened from her sister's porch swing, the wicker creaking under her turquoise nightgown traded for loose linens that breathed with the Delta breeze. Evelyn's vulnerability was a revelation, the older woman's pride yielding to admissions that peeled back decades of guarded heart. "I pushed you away because you reminded me of my own fears, of losing Ethan to someone who wouldn't understand our world. But you saved me from worse." The words hung, heavy with the unsaid apology, and Niaza's throat tightened, forgiveness blooming tentative in her chest, like night blooming Sirius under moonlight. Niaza's days filled with deliberate reinvention, morning runs along the Mississippi, the river's muddy churn a metaphor for her churning soul, afternoons lost in charcoal strokes that captured the raw edges of hurt, her ebony hands smudged with the evidence of creation. Her career flourished in the isolation. A new client, a young black artist grappling with identity, mirroring fragments of her own fractured self. "Draw the anger," Niaza urged during their session, her voice steady, guiding the woman's brush through storms of color. In those moments, empowerment surged, a quiet fire that warmed the chill of Ethan's absence. Yet nights brought the ghosts, dreams of the cottage's four-poster bed, Ethan's breath warm on her neck, shattered by Evelyn's accusatory glare. She'd wake gasping, the locket at her throat a cool anchor, whispering of ancestors who'd endured worse divides. Ethan's messages arrived like hesitant olive branches, texts laced with longing, photos of the cottage's garden where magnolias drooped in sympathy. "Miss your laugh filling these walls," one read, followed by a voice note, his hazel eyes shadowed in the video, voice cracking on her name. Niaza's heart clenched, love's embers flaring against the separation's frost. But she replied measuredly, each word a step toward balance. "Healing takes time," she'd type, her fingers pausing over sen, the admission a mirror to her own tentative mending. He suggested counseling, his plea raw. "I want us whole, Niaza. No more shadows." The idea took root, a seed of hope amid the thorns, and she agreed, booking sessions at a neutral French Quarter office where wrought iron balconies framed their fragile reunions. The first therapy hour was a crucible, the counselor's neutral space a confessional under soft lamplight. Ethan arrived early, his white button-down rumpled, hazel eyes searching hers with a desperation that mirrored her inner storm. Niaza entered last, her curls tamed into a crown, her presence a quiet command of the room. They sat across from each other, the counselor's voice a gentle prod. "Speak your truths." Ethan went first, his words tumbling like floodwaters. Regrets for silenced defenses, for letting Evelyn's bias echo unchecked in their home. "I saw you shrinking, and I froze," he confessed, tears carving paths down his cheeks, his hands extended in supplication. Niaza's chest ached, the pain fresh yet cathartic, her own voice emerging steady. "You made me question if our love was enough against the tide. I needed you as my shield, not my echo." The admission bridged them, tentative touches, fingertips brushing, rekindling sparks long dimmed. Evelyn's transformation paralleled their own, her weekly calls evolving into invitations, lunches at a riverside cafe where crawfish boils steamed between them. The older woman arrived with poise regained, but her eyes held a softened light, her dark hands steady as she passed the étouffée. "I enrolled in a class on family dynamics," she'd share, her voice laced with wry humor, the confession a balm to Niaza's lingering scars. "Turns out prejudice isn't inherited. It's chosen, and I'm unchoosing it." Laughter bubbled between them, genuine and light. Evelyn's anecdotes of youth, growing up in the Ninth Ward, fighting for dignity amid Jim Crow's remnants, drawing parallels to Niaza's own lineage. In those shared stories, enmity dissolved, replaced by a kinship forged in fire. Evelyn's respect manifesting in small gestures. A necklace unearthed from the safe, its pearls gleaming like absolution. "For the woman who guarded my legacy," she said, fastening it around Niaza's neck, the cool beads a weight of acceptance that brought tears to both. Lana's downfall threaded through their healing like a cautionary refrain. The news clipping Ethan forwarded. "Heiress scammer nabbed at airport, her pale face mugshot stark, debts exposed in lurid detail." Evelyn read it aloud during one call, her voice steady with closure. "She'll pay, but I've already lost enough." The justice was cold comfort, but it affirmed Niaza's instincts, a validation that steadied her step. As weeks waned, the separation's edges softened. Ethan's visits to her sisters became rituals. Walks under live oaks draped in Spanish moss, hands entwined, conversations delving deeper into dreams deferred. "I want to build with you, not just beside you," he vowed one twilight, his lips brushing her temple, the promise of vow renewed. Niaza returned to the cottage on a sun-drenched morning, the door opening to Ethan's embrace, the four-poster bed waiting like a reclaimed throne. Evelyn arrived later, bearing gumbo in a cast-iron pot, her smile tentative yet warm. "Homecomings deserve spice," she quipped, setting the table with deliberate care, the three of them orbiting a meal that tasted of reconciliation. Laughter flowed freer, Evelyn's stories now inclusive, drawing Niaza in as kin. As night fell, Ethan and Niaza retreated to their sanctuary, the silk sheets a canvas for rediscovery, his hands mapping her curves with reverence, her sighs a symphony of mended trust. In his arms, Niaza felt whole, the turquoise nightgown folded away, but its essence woven into her skin. Resilient, radiant, unyielding. Yet healing's path wound onward. Evelyn's growth a mirror to their own. Her apologies evolving into advocacy, volunteering at Niaza's art center. Her presence a quiet force against the biases she'd once embodied. The cottage breathed anew, walls echoing not with division, but harmony's tentative song. Niaza traced the pearls at her throat, the locket beside it a dual talisman, her heart swelling with the quiet triumph of bonds reforged. Love, she understood now, wasn't absence of storm, but dancing through it, together, unbroken. The magnolias in the cottage garden had shed their petals by the time Niaza and Ethan's renewed vows echoed softly in the backyard. A private ceremony under the Louisiana sun, petals carpeting the grass like confetti from a healed wound. Evelyn stood witness, her dark eyes misty with a pride no longer shadowed by doubt, her hand clasped in Niaza's as the officiant pronounced them bound anew. The turquoise silk nightgown, now a cherished relic folded in lavender-scented tissue, symbolized the resilience that had carried them through. Niaza slipping into a flowing sundress of emerald green, her ebony skin radiant, curls crowned with fresh blooms. Ethan's hand trembled as he slid the ring back on her finger, his hazel eyes locking with hers in a gaze that promised vigilance. The white gold band etched with their initials, a testament to battles won and scars honored. Life wove forward in rhythms reclaimed, the cottage no longer a stage for intrusion, but a symphony of shared silences and laughter's crescendo. Mornings began with Ethan's coffee brewing, the aroma mingling with Niaza's charcoal sketches spread across the kitchen table, portraits of clients' triumphs, her art therapy practice blooming into a community beacon. Evelyn's visits, once tempests, now arrived with the chime of a texted heads up, bearing baskets of pralines or stories from her volunteer shifts at the center. "Look what your girl inspired," she'd say, unfolding a young artist's canvas, vibrant strokes of self-discovery that mirrored Niaza's own journey. The older woman's transformation was profound, her once stern features softened by lines of genuine joy, her apologies long since evolved into actions. Hosting potlucks where she championed Niaza's heritage dishes, her voice rising in defense against any whisper of bias in their circle. Lana's shadow faded to a footnote in tabloid footnotes, her trial a swift reckoning in a New Orleans courtroom where the judge's gavel fell like final punctuation. "Attempted grand larceny and fraud," the headlines blared, her pale face gaunt in custody photos, debts unraveled thread by thread. Evelyn attended the sentencing alone, emerging with a quiet closure, her report to Niaza over iced tea terse yet freeing. 2 years restitution. She's gone, for good. The news elicited no triumph in Niaza, only a somber nod, the justice a mirror to her own unmasking of deceit. Ethan wrapped an arm around her waist as Evelyn spoke, his touch a steady anchor, the three of them orbiting a table laden with beignets, the sweetness a counterpoint to bitterness past. Niaza's strength deepened in the afterglow, her sessions with the counselor now joint rituals, Ethan's hand in hers as they dissected lingering doubts, his confessions evolving from guilt to gratitude. "You taught me to see," he'd murmur post-session, driving home through the quarter's narrow streets, jazz spilling from open doorways like anthems to their rebirth. Their nights in the four-poster bed reignited with deliberate tenderness, his lips tracing the curve of her neck, her fingers weaving through his hair, the silk sheets whispering approvals of rediscovery. Intimacy rebuilt brick by brick, each caress a vow against the fractures, Niaza's body arching in trust renewed, her moans a melody of reclamation. "You're my home," Ethan breathed against her skin, the words sealing the sanctuary they'd fought to preserve. Evelyn's kinship blossomed unexpectedly, her invitations pulling Niaza into corners of her world long barred. Sundays at the Ninth Ward Market, where the older woman bartered for okra with vendors who'd known her youth, her arm linking Niaza's in easy camaraderie. "Mama would have loved you," Evelyn confided one humid afternoon, fanning herself with a palmetto leaf, her voice thick with ancestral echo. The revelation bridged generations, Evelyn sharing tales of her grandmother's civil rights marches, parallels drawn to Niaza's own unyielding spirit. In return, Niaza opened her sketchbook, charcoal portraits capturing Evelyn's laugh lines, the older woman tearing up at the gift. You've given me back my reflection. The bond forged in Fire's forge proved unbreakable. Evelyn's advocacy a quiet revolution. Donating to anti-bias workshops, her presence at Niaza's center, a beacon for women navigating similar storms. Challenges lingered, subtle as Delta fog. Evelyn's occasional slips into old habits, a hesitant comment on traditional ways, quickly retracted with a self-deprecating chuckle. Ethan's overprotectiveness, born of fear's residue, gently navigated in their talks. Yet these were threads in a richer weave, strengthening the fabric rather than fraying it. Niaza's locket and pearls, twin talismans at her throat, jingled softly during her runs, a rhythm syncing with her heartbeat's steady cadence. Her practice expanded, a mural project in the community center blooming under her guidance. Walls alive with stories of Black women rising, Evelyn's volunteer brushstrokes adding strokes of solidarity. One balmy evening, as fireflies danced in the garden, the trio gathered for a ritual of their own. Evelyn's gumbo simmering, Ethan's playlist of Zydeco filling the air. Laughter cascaded, Evelyn's toast lifting her glass. To family, not by blood, but by choice. To Niaza, who showed this old fool the light. Cheers rang out, Ethan's arm around Niaza's waist, his kiss lingering on her temple. The moment a pinnacle of harmony. Later in the bedroom's hush, Niaza slipped into the turquoise silk, the fabric a lover's caress, drawing Ethan close. Their union was fervent, bodies entwining in a dance of gratitude, his hands reverent on her curves, her nails grazing his back. Climaxes crashing like gulf waves, sealing their odyssey. In the quiet aftermath, Niaza traced Ethan's jaw, her voice a whisper against his chest. We made it. He nodded, eyes shining, the cottage's walls bearing witness to their triumph. A sanctuary reclaimed, boundaries etched in love's indelible ink. Evelyn's footsteps faded down the drive, her parting wave a promise of tomorrow's visits. The night enveloped them, stars pricking the sky like affirmations. Niaza's heart full with the knowledge that from betrayal's ashes, they'd risen, not unscathed, but unbreakable, their story a testament to resilience's quiet roar. As the final echoes of Niaza's triumph fade, remember, from betrayal's thorns blooms unbreakable resilience. What hit home for you? Evelyn's awakening or love's fierce reclaiming? Share your thoughts below. Your stories fuel ours. Thanks for journeying through this tale of shadows and light. Until next time, keep guarding your peace. Stay fierce.